G'day, it's Saint here. How's your month been? It's been a while since I've had a recording. Now, it's not very often that I get to interview a journalist, and today I get to interview a journalist, somebody who you know, and it's Kensington 25.
Hello, how are you going? Welcome to YouTube, welcome to Fletcher's channel. What's been going on in your world?
Probably not that much, or maybe a lot. Tell us something like that down there. Tell us all about it. Kensington 25 is doing another journalism course. It's not the first journalist course. You have done journalist courses before.
Third time lucky, I've done two. You might be asking why I'm doing a third. Well, I'm a glutton for punishment, an absolute masochist. But really the reason I'm doing journalism is I'm a very nosy person, and I like to know exactly what's going on in your lives, all the scandals, all the salacious gossip. If you've got any, I'm your man.
So that's on Kensington 25 on YouTube. If you know something, send him a message, especially if it's in Sydney. There's so much going on in Sydney that people don't know about because, well, let's face it, media agencies in Sydney are really not that honest, really, are they?
No comment. I couldn't possibly say it's not in my interests.
Although some of the local newspapers are more honest than others. You've done some journalism for a local rag in the last few weeks.
Yes, indeed. There is a great local paper here in Sydney called City News. It's got very good local stories. It's a good paper, some brilliant variety of events that are happening, what's going on. Also, great local station 2SER. I've had a couple of things on that too. So check out Sydney City News and 2SER as well.
At what time can people tune in to listen to your program on 2SER?
Well, I have things throughout the day, but the last time I had one on was a couple of weeks ago. On their morning, on a Wednesday morning, they have a show called the 11 AM show, so do check that one out if you can. Also, of course, City News, you'll see a few of my articles and articles from my friends. So if it's happening in Sydney, first for news, check out City News.
Now, in the UTS course, you told me once that you met some of the journalists from East Timor, from the Balibo 5, was it?
Indeed. One of my lecturers, in fact I saw him yesterday, Tony Maniati, was an ABC journalist. He was in Balibo. He was one of those who broke the news of the Balibo 5, which was quite a major story. So Tony Maniati is one of my journalists. Isn't this a wonderful, quiet part of Sydney? Very serene. And another brilliant journalist on my course is Paul Ham, who was the ex-Sunday Times Australia correspondent for the London Sunday Times. We've got a great one, Jenna Price, who works for the Canberra Times. We've got Wendy Bacon, who's a very well-known Australian investigative journalist. So we've got some of the top journalists lecturing us. We have guest lectures. We had George Negus from SBS, who's a very well-known Australian journalist.
Right?
Wonderful guy. Had so much to tell us. I mean, you sit there and you're talking to a guy who's interviewed President Bush, President Obama, Margaret Thatcher, some of the best known politicians around the world, and it can be quite humbling, but it's also very inspirational. Great man. We've had some brilliant people. We had one of the recent hosts of Media Watch, and I tell you, I love Media Watch on the ABC, but I would be scared being one of those hosts, having to criticise every other journalist out there. But I will say, my lecturer, Jenna Price, she says her greatest nightmare is that one of her students will one day appear on Media Watch. So here's hoping, fingers crossed.
He's actually not trained in journalism, he's trained as a lawyer, isn't he? So I don't think he's particularly scared of journalists. With his law degree, he's quite a sharp lawyer too, apparently.
Very clever guy. He's actually English as well, the current host. He's a British guy. And I love that wry sense of humour, that element of sarcasm. But I would not want to get on the wrong side of him. I'll be watching very closely, and I will be on my best behaviour.
So it's just like a very hands-on course where you actually have to do journalism as part of the course. How does it compare to the courses that you have done in the UK?
I'll be honest, all three of the courses were brilliant. But what surprised me is this course seems more international. In other words, when I did the courses in the UK, it was very much London-centric, very much UK-centric. With this, we look far more at international news, and we look at international politics and the world. It's not like we're just limited to what's happening in Sydney or Australia. That's what I really like about it. It gives a more international and global perspective.
It's interesting you should say that because, you know, generally in Australia, we don't just, even in our schooling, if we do actually go to a good school, We don't just do Australian history in Victoria. We had to do American history and UK history. I had to do French history as well. And whereas in Britain you wouldn't have to do Australian history, or especially not Canadian or New Zealand history, what's the point? You're in the UK. Why would you want to? And it's similar in the US. They don't have to, but we do because we're a smaller country, which in a sense it's to our advantage, I guess, that we get to observe the rest of the world.
I think you get a more global perspective because Australia is essentially a country made up of immigrants. You get that global attitude, you get that global perspective, and it's less Australia-centric, and that's what I like about Australia. You know, there are people from all cultures here, all walks of life, and they've all come together into that melting pot. It's not always perfect, and it is a rough ride at times, but I think it's great in so many ways, and it has so many advantages, and we learn from it.
You were very nervous when you started this journey. How do you feel about it now?
I'm still nervous. I'm a lot more confident because I've survived this far. I've got about 3 weeks until the end of the first semester, and I've got so many deadlines. It's unbelievable. But I am on track. I am reaching my deadlines. I am on schedule. I've got interviews set up for my various deadlines. So at the end of the semester, come back and ask me. But right now I'm a lot more confident than I was, but still not out of danger quite yet, but getting there.
And how are you finding the homework with, you've got a building site next to your flat, which is really noisy, and you were talking about moving once. Now,
I'm still moving, 100%, I've got to. This building work doesn't end until the end of next year, so it's not going anywhere, but I am. When you get woken up at 9 every day, sometimes as early as 8:30, 8 o'clock, and you've got to study, you've got to make phone calls. When you do journalism, when you have to do interviews, and you hear this constant jackhammering.
Oh, I hate that. And they always do it early.
It's tedious, it's awful, it gives you a headache. And actually, I can understand why people do get driven insane by things like building work. Unless you're experiencing it, it's hard to imagine. But when you are hearing that every day, 6 days a week, it's a nightmare, and it is horrible. And there have been a couple of times where I've just had to just throw my books down, throw my papers down, and just scream the place down. There's an expression I heard a few years ago, I think it's from a play or a book, hell has harbour views.
Yes.
And I have the most beautiful views of Sydney, the harbour, the bridge, the sea, and even the naval base. But when you hear that noise every day, it does become a living hell. And you know, I'm happy for that view, but for what I'm paying, I'm not getting a peaceful life. And I know when you live in the city, you have certain expectations. You can't expect it to be like St. Ives or a beautiful coastal town. But you do have some expectations where you can have a decent standard of living. And getting that noise every day is not a decent standard of living.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you find a nice place, because prices around here are just horrific in Sydney and artificially inflated. They've lifted the standards on foreign ownership, and apparently half of the houses in Bondi, places like that, are empty.
Really?
It's an artificial. It's not supply and demand at all. It's foreign ownership, mainly from the US, the UK, and China and India, and they're using them as their holiday homes. Really rich people buying Sydney houses as holiday homes, and most of the time they're empty.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is those of you who are going to be buying apartments in the block next to me, I hope you enjoy them, because I certainly haven't. That's all I've got to say.
God bless you all. The same.
Cheers. See you later.
Oh,